Over the weekend, we got to experience the world's most exciting, boring race, the highly prestigious Monaco Grand Prix. It went, as you'd expect, quite boring, but around lap 50 there was some rain, which made it quite chaotic. I say some rain, it was quite bad. The qualifying itself was amazing. And in this video, I'm just going to go over the whole weekend, really. And I'm just going to give my opinions that no one needs or wants, let's be honest. So the weekend obviously started with practice that I didn't watch. I watched a bit of FP3 just before the qualifying, obviously. And the only thing I can remember is that Lewis crashed. The reason why I didn't watch the practice, you might not believe it, I went outside and I touched grass for once. I know, it's insane. But the qualifying, oh my word, it was special. So Monaco qualifying, basically 75% decides where you'll finish in the race. Alright, it might not be that blunt, but it's pretty important. That's why the qualifying at Monaco is so special. You know, it's very tense and there's high stakes. It just makes for great viewing. And this year's qualifying didn't disappoint at all. I think most people knew that it was going to be a good qualifying session when, you know, Checo just forgot he had the brake pedal and a steering wheel and just decided to put it into the wall.
Why are we still here?
He was out of qualifying after the shunt and, you know, in the dizzying height of 20th place. And not only was he out of qualifying, he was probably out of favour at Red Bull, let's be honest. Christian Horner definitely punched the screen when he saw that. But just to rub salt in the wounds, the car was airlifted away, and all the work that Red Bull have done to, you know, keep the car secret, it was just on view to everyone at Monaco. You know, there's some 80-year-old granddad that could see it outside of his little accommodation. Within seconds, there was pictures of the Red Bull underfloor just all over Twitter. You know, all the work that the engineers have put into the car just instantly just out there for everyone to see. To be fair, it probably won't do much. It'll probably be more of an annoyance to Red Bull than anything that would scare them. But the thought of Aston Martin, Ferrari, Mercedes all quickly get the notebooks out and just sketching the car it's really funny. In the end, Yuki and Lando just about managed to get into Q3. Even after Lando took major damage to his car after he crashed. Well, he kind of... He crashed. I can't really defend him here. I think they fixed the suspension in like less than half the time it would take normally. So, you know, fair play, that's a mega job. Stroll, however, was not so fortunate. He proved himself as an amazing teammate to Fernando Alonso and dropped out in Q2. Q3, however, was immense. Verstappen first at the time, they put him on provisional pole, and I think everyone knew that it wasn't fast enough at first. And everyone was proved right when Fernando Alonso quickly beat it. So fans were, you know, starting to get excited. And according to himself, he was, and I quote,
"I'm pushing like an animal, mate."
Even both Ferraris went ahead of the Red Bull, which was honestly amazing to see for the 3 seconds that it was real. More excitement began to build, you know, floating around. Well, no, like I said, it just didn't last for long. Max restored his P1 shortly after, but wait, Esteban Ocon, out of nowhere, put his whole life and soul into. He must have sacrificed his soul. He put his car on pole in what was an amazing lap, especially in the Alpine, which hasn't been anywhere near the Ferraris, Mercedes, Aston Martins, Red Bulls. In what was an absolutely amazing lap from Ocon. Max just weren't setting the times they needed to set. People were thinking Alonso pole, Ocon pole now, could the Ferraris do something? It was by no means done though. Charles Leclerc looked to continue his streak of poles at Monaco. He placed his car in provisional pole. And people, including myself, were starting to really get excited about the things that could happen here. Because just after that, Alonso put himself on pole. It was down to the wire now too. There was like less than a minute left. And the chances of an Alonso pole in the Principality, they were really high. Max set off on a final lap and he just weren't getting the time right. He was down in the first 2 sectors and it looked all but lost. And then out of nowhere, in the last corner, he went full sweat mode. The very last corner, how has he done that? But anyway, in the end, Max broke the hearts of many Spaniards and myself, with the final podium sitters being Max, Alonso and Charles. But the drama did not end there at all. Shortly after the end of qualifying, Charles was called into the steward's office. There's got to be a study at some point, I swear to God. Whenever Charles is racing at Monaco, everything goes wrong for him. The matter at hand was whether Charles impeded Lando on one of his laps. And after a short discussion, it was deemed that he did. And looking back on the replays, he definitely did. But what I will say is that it wasn't his fault. Twitter quickly erupted with Charles and Ferrari fans just ripping into Xavi Marcos because he simply just didn't tell Charles that Lando was coming. You can look back on the radio recordings and the actual footage and there's no sign that Lando was coming through there. What do I think on the matter?
I prefer really not to speak.
Charles was given a 3-grid penalty which put him back to 6th, and Esteban Ocon was promoted from his original 4th in qualifying to 3rd, taking the last spot in the podium places. What a turn for the books that was, but obviously we still had the race. The race itself for the most part was quite boring. I mean, as you'd expect from Monaco nowadays, you know, no one really goes to Monaco because it's great racing. It's more of like the feel of Monaco. I don't think there was a single overtake in the top 10 for the first half of the race. Instead, it was just a competition between Stroll, Perez, Sargent, Hulkenberg for how many front wings they can lose. Red Bull opted for the one-stop strategy for Perez, hoping that he could overtake other drivers when they're in the pit later, obviously. But throughout the course of the race, it slowly turned into a 5-stop strategy. Not too much happened. Alonso failed to overtake Max in the first corner, and Max just built up a sizable distance between the two. Ferrari hid the wrath of Carlos Sainz after they pitted him, even though he was setting purple sectors. He was not a happy chap. To be honest, I wouldn't be either. You know, they kind of just took a poo on his head and told him to deal with it. Like I mentioned before, the first 50 laps or so were just not really much happened. However, about halfway through the race, there was rumours of rain, and a growing feeling across the paddock started to spread, really, that it was going to rain, but no one could really say when it was. So it was kind of this weird feeling of, you know it's going to rain, you don't know when, and you're just guessing how it could happen any lap. But, you know, it was quite tense. At the front, I think it was described as a staring contest between Max and Fernando. Max being on the mediums and Fernando being on the hards. In theory, Fernando could last longer on track because of the harder compound, and if it was going to rain, it would be better for Fernando because he wouldn't have to pit already, whereas Max would, and that would be a wasted pit stop. However, we all know Max just doesn't care about theory. In practicality, Max has this wizard-like ability to turn any set of compound, it could be softs, and he'd still run 50 laps with them. He was on mediums for the better of 50 laps, and he was still far ahead. However, he did start to struggle, and Fernando was slowly but surely cutting down that gap. Ocon was still running in third place, but he had Lewis to think about, who was breathing down his neck. And then, in the blink of an eye, it started raining. The whole race just changed. In the 50s, the laps, not like the 1950s or anything, George Russell started to report that it was spitting down by turn 3. Now, was it enough for the drivers to start going on inters? The teams didn't think so, and they kept them out there in the slicks. Mostly because the rain was only in a small part of the track, and teams thought they could compensate for the loss of temperature in the tyres and just the loss of grip in general throughout the other corners of the track. However, it soon started to become a problem. The tyre temperatures were plummeting around that part of the track, and the drivers simply just couldn't make it up in the other part of the track. So a little grip, it was getting tense. Lance Stroll was kind of a guinea pig for Aston Martin. He was quite low down, so they, didn't really care about his position at that point, so they just threw him on the inters to see what it was like. And quite surprisingly, Aston Martin didn't deem Lance Stroll's time suitable for the conditions, and instead chose to pit Fernando for slicks. Now, this is debatably where you could say Fernando missed out on winning the race. I don't agree with saying that because he finished second anyway, so you can't really say he missed out on anything. And let's be honest, there's a good chance Max still would have won. Red Bull followed Aston Martin and Fernando and pitted Max for slicks, but it quickly became apparent that it just wasn't the right call. Cars started struggling to make their way across the whole track, and if Carlos's afternoon wasn't bad enough, he went too deep at Mirabeau and slid off the track. I guess you could say his car was lost. No. But by now, the rain was simply just too much for teams to ignore. Aston Martin recalled Fernando and changed them onto the inters. Red Bull did the same and Max came out on top. So effectively, Aston Martin lost the pit stop. But like I said, even with the loss of the pit stop, it probably wouldn't have done much. But it is just a big what-if situation. What if Fernando just went on the inters instead of going on the slicks? But, it's all good saying this in hindsight. At the time, it might not have been the right call. Further down the grid, in these conditions, Ferrari had no choice but to double-stack the pit stop, and Carlos must have been quite depressed at this point.
No, yeah. It's unacceptable.
He was stuck behind Charles in the pit stop and lost more time. The whole field was on inters now, apart from one person, Kevin Magnussen. I'm not sure if Haas just forgot he was racing, but they just kept him out on the hard compound in terrible conditions. George Russell followed Carlos's master plan in going too deep at Mirabeau, and when reversing out of the side road, he was met by the front wing of Checo.
Keep it clean, please.
In what was a bizarre sequence, Perez somehow managed to keep his front wing. That was for about 30 seconds until he just hit a wall. The F1 gods gave him a second chance, and he just decided, no, I don't need it. Again, Lance Stroll and Logan Sargent carried on this little competition of crashing. Lance ultimately won when he just crashed twice within 5 seconds, losing his front wing and his place in the Grand Prix in the process. In even more chaos and just frenzy, we had another classic Yuki radio moment. Yuki claimed that his brakes weren't working properly, and when his radio engineer suggested a new setting, he just proceeded to scream at him.
I know, but this brake sucks! Are you trying to cross me or what?
Poor Yuki though, the car was all over the place. This allowed both the McLarens to pass Yuki in the end, with Lando Norris now in the points. George was eventually given a 5-second penalty by the stewards, after which George started begging the Mercedes team to let him pass Lewis. He was worried that Charles would start eating away at the time and be in the threshold that once the race was finished he would leapfrog George because of the penalty. And of course Charles responded by going even slower and managing to find himself 10 seconds behind George. In the end, the rain calmed down. It was more of a straightforward, just race to the finish line. And in the end, Max picked up another win in Monaco, his last one being in 2021. Fernando scored his first second place this season and in quite a while. And quite bizarrely and amazingly and just stunningly, Ocon managed to keep his third place. The first French driver to finish on a podium in Monaco in quite some time. He celebrated quite a bit. I need people to start recognising that Ocon is underrated. He's a good driver. He's won a race. He's so underrated. Of course, when he's not picking up 50-second penalties. Mercedes done a lot better than loads of people expected, including myself. They managed to pick up a P4 and P5. Whether that was down to the upgrades or just the fact that Ferrari just decided to run off a cliff, I'm not too sure. Ferrari found a new way every race to terrorise the drivers. I guess we'll see next week what happens. Further down, Gasly separated both the Ferraris in what Ted Kravitz described as a tomato sauce bread sandwich of some sort, I'm not sure. The creative sparks that run through that man's mind are unbelievable. And the final points were picked up surprisingly by McLaren's. Oscar did an amazing job and he got a few overtakes and managed to get that final point position. The McLaren's had a really good race pace and even qualifying pace. I'm hoping that they continue to improve because they really should be towards the front of the grid. Andrea Seidel keeps coming out and said that by Silverstone it's going to be a completely different car, so I'm excited. After Monaco, Max leads the championship by 39 points I think, and to be honest it might be a bit early to say, but I just can't see a way back for Checo. I hope I'm proven wrong, but after Miami last week and going out in Q1 in Monaco, we're not getting a single point. It's a big blow, and Max at the moment, it's just a robot, let's be honest. More interestingly though, the Mercedes are only 1 point behind the Aston Martins. I think that just goes to show how important the second driver is. Lance is battling with the wall most races, whereas Fernando's battling the Red Bulls. Lance really does need to improve though if they want to keep that second place spot in the constructors. Fernando just has no support, and I guess you could say that's because Fernando's obviously one of the greatest drivers of all time, and Lance isn't on that level. I know Lance isn't really expected to be competing for race wins, but he should be scoring points at least, and he has the man anyway, the way the car is this year. And I don't want to pile onto the Lance hate because I think he is a good driver. You know, he's set pole, he's at a podium. He's not a bad driver at all. I think he's just very inconsistent and shown this season. He had a great race in Bahrain, and even when you consider his injury, it was an amazing job. But since then, he's kind of went a bit stale. I don't know if you can describe the driver as stale, but yeah, he just needs to improve, and I'm sure he'll know that himself. But it's already race week for Spain. Thank God. I'm up in Ferrari, decided to pull a finger out and do something. It's so hard hearing Christian Horner every race just passive aggressively just mock Ferrari. Now that I've said that, Leclerc's engine's going to blow up in lap 5 of the race, and Carlos going to do his best to find the gravel. I'm very interested to see the pace of the Mercedes in Spain. Catalonia's a track that can really showcase the upgrades. Obviously as well, they got rid of the final chicane, so it's a bit better. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to this weekend. But I do hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I've enjoyed making it. Remember to subscribe and leave a like and a share maybe. It'd mean the world to me. Let me know you've enjoyed it too. Also leave a comment on what you thought on the Monaco Grand Prix. I'm interested to find out what you think about it. But in all cases, let's look forward to Sunday, Saturday and the whole race weekend. But until then, stay safe, have fun, and I'll see you soon.